I'm Justin Harper, 43, a speaker applauded by thousands, yet my brother's betrayal and my parents' favoritism threaten to shatter the life I've built. I am Justin Harper, 43 years old, a speaker who stands before hundreds of people talking about success, effort, and self-worth. But every time I step off the stage, when the spotlight dims, I return to myself, a brother, a son carrying a nameless wound in my heart. That wound has a name: Dylan, my younger brother. Dylan and I are like two lines that intersect once and then drift apart forever. I didn't come from a wealthy family. Our suburban house in Salem, Oregon was always filled with laughter, but also with worries. Dad was a bus mechanic, Mom was a homemaker, and money was something we counted nickel by nickel. I learned to be frugal from a young age, from saving spare change to skipping dinner to buy used text. Don't resent it. Poverty isn't a sin. It taught me one thing. If I wanted to change my life, I had to do it myself. But my younger brother, Dylan, was different. He was the sunshine in our parents' eyes, the spoiled youngest child. Dylan was lazy, fond of sleeping until noon, and never completed anything he started. He dropped out of school halfway, claiming, "Life's long, why bother studying?" While I hunched over work, Dylan sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, laughing carefree. I didn't blame him for that. Who doesn't have the right to live as they please? But what pierced my heart was the way he looked at me, as if I owed him something, as if everything I had belonged to him. I remember one afternoon when I returned from a business trip to Paris, exhausted but exhilarated after signing a major contract. I sat at the dining table telling Mom and Dad about my hectic days, the speeches that earned standing ovations. Mom nodded, but her eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for Dylan. He walked in, hair disheveled, wearing a wrinkled jacket, yawning widely. "Mom, I'm hungry," Dylan said, and just like that, she hurried to the kitchen. Dad patted his shoulder, asking him a few questions. My story was left hanging like a drop of water falling on a lake, leaving no trace. "I'm not jealous, honestly. Your success is nice, Justin, but Dylan's our priority," Mom said, her words a dagger twisting in my chest. But I've long grown used to comforting myself. I remember the tough, lonely years in college, living in a cramped, rented room where the smell of mildew clung to my clothes. By day I studied. By night I worked as a cashier, delivered newspapers, anything to make ends meet. "You'll never make it," Dylan sneered, lounging while I toiled, his mockery fueling my resolve to prove him wrong. But every time I wanted to give up, I thought of Mom and Dad, of Dylan, of our old house. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted them to be proud. Dylan, on the other hand, always lived with our parents, always loved, always eyeing what I had. When we were kids, he'd fight me for my toys. Now, with my modest success, he started coveting what I own. He doesn't say it outright, but I see his eyes linger on the coat I wear, the truck I drive, the apartment I bought with my own sweat. Once he asked to borrow money, his tone casual. "Do you earn so much? What's a little for me?" I gave it to him, not because I had plenty, but because I didn't want to argue. But each time, I felt like I was nurturing something dangerous, something that would turn and bite me. I travel a lot for work, from Seattle to Seoul, from grand auditoriums to small conference rooms. Each trip is a challenge, but also a chance to prove myself. I love the feeling of standing before a crowd sharing my story, inspiring those searching for light in the darkness. But every time I return home, I face Dylan, the brother who's never known what effort means, who's never understood the value of what I've worked so hard to achieve. Mom and Dad don't see it. To them, Dylan is the child who needs protection, while I'm the strong one, the one who doesn't need attention. "Justin, you can handle things," Mom once said, her voice gentle but like a knife. I nodded, smiled, but inside, "Why am I invisible to you?" I whispered to myself, clutching a photo of us as kids, my plea unheard. I don't hate Dylan. There are moments when I miss the little boy who used to run after me, holding my hand when he got lost in the market. But that boy is gone, replaced by a 37-year-old man who lives off our parents, off me, with no intention of changing. I've tried talking to him, advising him to find a job, a purpose. Dylan just laughed, shrugged. "Why worry? I'm fine like this." Fine, I don't know, but I know there's an unbridgeable gap between us. I chose my path, one full of thorns but also full of light. Dylan chose his, an easy road, but I fear it will one day lead him to a dead end. I stand before the mirror, adjusting my tie, preparing for my next business trip. My phone buzzes. A message from Mom. "Justin, Dylan needs some money. Can you help him?" I sigh, not replying. Out there, the world awaits me. But in my heart, I hold an unsent letter to Dylan. Its words burning, "Stop stealing my life." I left Salem on a misty morning, pulling my suitcase behind me, my mind already set on Seoul. This 8-week business trip was a big opportunity, a series of international conferences where I would stand before thousands sharing my story. I didn't mind the exhaustion because every speech was a brick in the foundation of my dream. Before leaving, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off the keys to my apartment and truck. "Please keep these for me," I said softly. Mom nodded. Dad patted my shoulder. And Dylan, as usual, was nowhere to be seen. I didn't think much of it. I trusted my parents. I trusted my family. Seoul greeted me with its frenetic pace. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of activity. Conferences, media interviews, handshakes, and polite smiles. I worked myself to the bone, but every time I stood on stage, seeing the attentive eyes in the audience, I felt every effort was worthwhile. I texted Mom a few times, checking on her and Dad's health. Her replies were brief, often ending with a line about Dylan. "Your brother's feeling down, probably needs some money." I sighed, transferred a modest amount as was my habit. I didn't want to argue from thousands of miles away. While I stood under the stage lights speaking about responsibility and self-respect, Dylan was back home, stepping into my world. Not as a brother, but as a thief. I couldn't know until I returned. The day I landed at the airport, Dylan's taunting voicemail, "Enjoy Seoul, check your place, big shot," sent a chill down my spine. I was exhausted but eager to get home, take a hot shower, and sleep for hours. I took a taxi since my truck was at my parents' house. When I opened the door to my apartment, I froze. Everything was out of place. The furniture was disheveled. The smell of cigarette smoke clung to the rugs, and on the table sat a few empty vodka bottles. My heart raced. I checked every room, every corner. There were no signs of a break-in, but someone had clearly been here, acting as if they owned the place. I called Mom immediately. "Mom, has anyone been in my apartment? I left the keys with you." Her voice hesitated. Then she spoke as if it were a minor matter. "Oh, Dylan stayed there for a few weeks. He said he needed a temporary place." I was speechless. A temporary place? Dylan lived with our parents. He had his own room, everything he needed. Why did he come into my apartment, rummage through my things, sleep in my bed? I tried to stay calm, pressing further. "And where's my truck? I need it for work." This time, Mom was silent for longer. "Justin, about that. Let me talk to Dylan." I couldn't wait. I drove to my parents' house, my blood boiling. Dylan was in the living room, listening to music through earphones, feet propped up on the table. He looked at me, smirking. "Back already? Had fun?" I didn't respond, cutting straight to the point. "Dylan, what were you doing in my apartment? Where's my truck?" He shrugged, his tone casual. "I borrowed the truck for a few spins. No big deal. Relax." I clenched my fists, trying not to shout. "So where's the truck now?" Dylan looked away, mumbling. "Well, it's not here right now." I forced him to explain. And then, like a punch to the chest, the truth came out. Dylan hadn't just driven my truck. He had pawned it. Pawned it. The truck I bought with my sweat, my sleepless nights, my exhausting long-haul flights. He pawned it to fund his partying, to pay for the expensive clothes he flaunted on social media. I stood there, staring at the brother I once held hands with in the market, feeling the ground crumble beneath me. "How are you going to get the money to get the truck back?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dylan scoffed. "You're the rich one, Justin. Bail me out like always," he sneered, his arrogance a slap to my sacrifice. I couldn't believe my ears. Not only had he stolen from me, but he acted as if it was my obligation, as if I owed him. I turned to my parents, who had witnessed the entire conversation. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Mom looked down. Dad cleared his throat and said, "Dylan was wrong, but he's still young, Justin. He didn't mean to hurt you," Dad said, his voice a weak shield for Dylan's crime. Young. Dylan is 37, no longer a child to be forgiven for foolish mistakes. I looked at my parents, waiting for an apology, a reprimand for Dylan, but nothing. Mom took Dylan's hand, comforting him. "Don't be so hard on him, Justin," she pleaded. "We'll make it right." Dad looked at me, his voice stern. "Justin, you're the older brother. You need to be forgiving. If the truck's gone, you'll survive," he said, dismissing my pain. "Don't let this tear the family apart." I laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow laugh. Family? Family is where I placed my trust only to be betrayed. Family is where I hoped for recognition only to receive indifference. I looked at Dylan, still sitting there, not a trace of remorse. "You think you can take my life and walk away?" I snapped, my voice shaking with years of pent-up rage. I looked at my parents, who were ready to overlook his every mistake because he was the child who needed protection. "You've chosen him over me my whole life," I said, my voice breaking. Mom gasped. "Justin, that's not true." And I realized, in this house, I had no place. I left without another word. On the drive back, Dylan's smirk and Mom's pleas clawed at me, a storm of betrayal I couldn't outrun. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the traces Dylan left behind, feeling as though I'd been robbed, not just of my possessions, but of my trust. I had done everything for my family, worked, sacrificed, endured, but in return, I got betrayal and blame. I closed my eyes, asking myself, can I keep forgiving? Can I keep being the strong older brother when my heart is bleeding? And then the past came rushing back, vivid as if it had happened yesterday. The years of growing up, the times I was overlooked, forgotten just because I was Justin, the strong older brother, the one who didn't need attention. I remember when I was 16, when I won first place in the regional speech competition. I clutched the small trophy, running home, my heart bursting with excitement. I imagined Mom would hug me, Dad would pat my shoulder proudly, telling the neighbors, but when I stepped into the house, Mom was consoling Dylan, then only 10, because he'd broken her favorite lamp. "Justin, put the trophy down and help me clean up the pieces," she said, not once glancing at the trophy in my hands. Dad sat in his chair. "Dylan's just a kid, Justin. You don't need coddling," he said, his voice a dismissal of my triumph. I stood there, my smile fading, the trophy suddenly feeling heavy. That night, I tucked it away in a drawer, never taking it out again. Moments like that repeated like a sad refrain in my childhood. I always tried, excelling in school, playing soccer, doing chores, not for praise, but for Mom and Dad to see me. But every time I brought home an achievement, Dylan would do something to steal the spotlight. He'd break something, skip school, or simply pretend to be sick. And just like that, all eyes turned to him. "Dylan's fragile," Mom would say. "You're our rock, Justin." Her words a chain binding me to silence. When I was 22, I earned a university scholarship, a chance to escape poverty, to change my life. I spent 5 months writing the essay, revising it endlessly, staying up all night to perfect it. The day I received the acceptance letter, my hands trembled as I opened the envelope, tears streaming down my face. I called home, my voice choked with emotion. "Mom, I got the scholarship. I'm going to university." Mom laughed over the phone, but then she said, "That's great, Justin, but Dylan just got in trouble for shoplifting. Can you come home and talk to him?" I hung up, collapsing onto the dorm floor, feeling as if my greatest joy had been snatched away. Dylan never tried. He dropped out of school, hung out with friends, spent our parents' money without a thought for the future. But Mom and Dad never blamed him. They bought him a new tablet, paid his fines when he got into trouble, and always said, "Dylan will change, just give him time." I didn't understand time. I had used my time to study, to work, to build a life independent of anyone. But in my parents' eyes, my efforts were expected, while Dylan's laziness was something to be forgiven. Once I came home for Easter bringing a small gift, a silk scarf I'd bought at a Paris flea market for Mom. I thought she'd like it since she always complained about the chill in spring. When I gave it to her, she smiled, but then she said, "Thank you, but Dylan needs a new jacket." "Do you have any money to lend him?" I nodded, handed over the money, but my heart felt crushed. That scarf, Mom never used it. I saw it lying in a corner of the closet. "Dylan's needs come first," she'd said, her words a wound I buried deep. I used to brush off those memories, telling myself that my parents loved me. They just didn't know how to show it. But sitting here now, facing Dylan's betrayal, him entering my apartment, taking my truck, pawning it like it was a toy, I can't lie to myself anymore. The injustice didn't start today. It's been decades in the making, from the days I was a boy clutching a speech trophy to now, a 43-year-old man still living in the shadow of his younger brother. I stood up, opened the drawer, and took out the old trophy from high school. It was tarnished, but intact. I held it, feeling the weight of my dreams, a hidden note I'd written to Mom years ago, begging for her to see me, now crumpled beside it. I didn't want to continue. I didn't want to be the strong older brother, the one who always forgives, always sacrifices. I'd given Dylan too many chances, given my parents too much time to see me, but they didn't see, and perhaps they never will. I set the trophy down, replaced by a resolve to reclaim my dignity. I knew what I had to do. Not out of anger, not of selfishness, but because I deserved respect, not just from others, but from myself. Dylan had crossed a line, and my parents, by shielding him, had pushed me to a point of no return. I picked up the phone and called a friend who's a lawyer. "I need advice," I said, my voice calm but resolute, "about filing a lawsuit. The past taught me that if I don't stand up for myself, no one will. I've lost too much. Not just the truck, but my trust, and the years I hoped my family would one day be fair. But today, I choose myself. I choose the hard but right path. And though my heart still aches, I know I'm finally breaking free from their shadow." The next day, I was at the lawyer's office. I never imagined I'd find myself here, sitting across from a middle-aged man in a suit, discussing suing my own brother. But that day, I was there, gripping the chair tightly, my heart heavy. "Justin, Ethan," my friend said in a calm voice, "are you sure you want to do this? This isn't just about money. This is family." I looked out the window where Salem was shifting under the glow of dusk. "I know," I replied, "but I don't have any other choice." The truck wasn't just a possession. It was a symbol of the years I'd poured my sweat into, the sleepless nights, the times I gritted my teeth and pushed through hardship. Dylan didn't just take it. He pawned it, as if all my efforts were a joke. And my parents, by shielding him, had pushed me to my limit. I wasn't suing Dylan out of anger. I was suing because I needed him to understand that actions have consequences, and I deserved respect. Ethan helped me prepare the paperwork. The pawn contract Dylan signed had several loopholes, and the law was on my side. The value of the truck, plus emotional damages, amounted to a significant sum. But I didn't care about the money. I wanted Dylan to face accountability, to learn to stand on his own as I had. I signed the lawsuit, filed it with the court, and notified my parents. It was the hardest call of my life. "Justin, what are you doing?" Mom screamed over the phone, her voice breaking. "You're tearing us apart," she sobbed, her words a desperate plea. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Mom, Dylan took my truck, pawned it, and didn't even apologize." "What do you think I should do?" Mom cried. "Not for me, but for Dylan." "He's your brother, Justin. Forgive him," Dad called right after, his voice furious. "Justin, withdraw the lawsuit now. Do you want the whole family to be shamed? Dylan knows he was wrong." "Let us handle it." I gave a bitter smile, not out of amusement, but because I'd seen it coming. "How will you handle it? Give Dylan more money? Forgive him again? Let him keep doing this?" Dad went quiet, then said, "You're too selfish, Justin. Do you think you're the only one who suffered?" I hung up, my hands trembling. Selfish. I'd given everything, time, money, patience, but it was never enough. A few days later, my parents showed up at my apartment. They didn't call ahead, just knocked. And when I opened the door, I saw Mom with red, swollen eyes and Dad with a tense expression. Dylan wasn't with them. Perhaps he didn't have the courage. They sat on the couch, still tinged with the smell of cigarette smoke from Dylan's stay. "Justin," Mom began softly, "I'm begging you. Don't sue Dylan. He's sorry. I'll pay to get the truck back. Just withdraw the lawsuit. I looked at Mom, the woman who raised me, but all I could see now was her blind favoritism. Have you ever thought about me? I asked, my voice choking. I work, I strive, I built everything from nothing, but you only see Dylan, only worry about Dylan. I'm tired. Mom cried. Dad looked down, but neither answered. Their silence confirmed what I'd known for a long time. In their eyes, I wasn't as important as Dylan. I didn't want to argue anymore. I made an offer, not to compromise, but to protect myself and perhaps to save Dylan. I'll withdraw the lawsuit, I said, but on one condition. Dylan has to get a job. He has to use his salary to pay off the truck's debt. Every transaction must be documented transparently, and from now on, Dylan can't ask you for money. Mom looked up, stunned. Dad frowned. Are you forcing him? You know Dylan's not used to working. I shook my head. No, Dad, I'm giving him a chance. If you keep shielding him, Dylan will never grow up. The air in the room was heavy as lead. Mom clutched Dad's hand as if I'd just sentenced Dylan to death. Justin, you're too rigid, she said, her voice trembling. You're breaking our family. I looked straight into her eyes, for the first time not backing down. Mom, I want Dylan to live like a man, not a child, forever. If you think that's suffering, then I have nothing more to say. Dad stood up, his voice cold. Do what you want, but don't blame us for not warning you. You'll lose us all, Justin. I didn't respond. I opened the door, seeing them out. When the door closed, I sank to the floor, hugging my knees. Regret? I didn't know, but I knew for the first time in my life, I was choosing to protect my worth, even if it meant fracturing ties with the people I loved most. A few days later, Mom called again, her voice weary. I agree. Dylan will get a job. I'll supervise him. Withdraw the lawsuit. I nodded, though she couldn't see. I'll withdraw it. But I want to meet Dylan to hear him commit to this. Mom hesitated, then agreed. The meeting was arranged at my parents' house, but I knew it wouldn't be a reconciliation. It would be my final attempt to make Dylan understand, to make my family understand, that I wasn't selfish, just someone who had endured too much for too long. I braced myself, but my heart still ached. I didn't want to lose my parents, didn't want to lose Dylan, but if the cost of keeping them was to keep sacrificing myself, I'd rather face this pain. I looked out the window. I held the letter, ready to confront Dylan with the truth he'd ignored for years. The meeting with Dylan was scheduled for a late weekend afternoon at our parents' house. I stepped into the familiar home, once my sanctuary, but now filled only with distance. Mom sat at the corner of the table, her eyes red and swollen. Dad leaned against the wall, his face tense. Dylan sat on the couch, head bowed, no trace of his usual carefree smirk. I looked at him, searching for the little boy who used to run after me, holding my hand in the market. But all I saw was a 37-year-old man with slumped shoulders and evasive eyes. I didn't beat around the bush. Dylan, I said, my voice calm but firm, I'll withdraw the lawsuit, but you have to commit. You need to find a job, pay off the debt with your own salary, and from now on, you can't ask Mom and Dad for money. Dylan looked up, his lips moving slightly, but he said nothing. Mom interjected, her voice trembling. Justin, don't push him. Dylan will try, but he needs time. I shook my head. Mom, time isn't something to waste. Dylan's had 12 years to grow up. It's time he takes responsibility. Finally, Dylan spoke, his voice low but lacking its usual defiance. All right, fine. I'll do it. I'm sorry. I looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. I wasn't sure if he was truly remorseful or just saying what he needed to get out of trouble, but I had no other choice. I nodded. Good. I'll be watching. If you don't follow through, the lawsuit will be refiled. Mom burst into tears. Dad sighed heavily, but I didn't waver. I'd given Dylan too many chances, and this was his last. I withdrew the lawsuit as promised. Ethan, my lawyer friend, shook his head when I told him. You're giving him a free pass again, Justin, he warned, but I needed to believe in change. I didn't know if I was right or wrong, only that I couldn't keep living in a cycle of unconditional forgiveness. Dylan needed to learn to stand on his own, and I needed to learn to let go, not of my family, but of the expectation that they'd change for me. In the months that followed, I got updates about Dylan through Mom. He found a job, a sales position at a car dealership. Low paying, but a start. Mom shared, her voice a mix of pride and worry. Dylan's been going to work regularly, but he says it's tiring. Say something to him, Justin. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to intervene, didn't want to be the older brother always pulling him up. Dylan needed to walk on his own 2 feet. Gradually, Dylan changed. He paid off the debt bit by bit, sending me small monthly payments with transparent documentation as I'd required. I didn't feel joy or relief, only a small sense of justice being restored. Dylan started taking care of himself, buying clothes with his own money, even moving out of our parents' house to rent a small studio. Mom called it a miracle, but to me, it was just what should have happened long ago. But the cost I paid was steep. My parents no longer spoke to me the way they used to. Mom still called, but only to talk about Dylan, never asking how I was or how my work was going. Dad was colder, as if I were the one who betrayed the family. Once I visited, bringing some fruit, hoping to mend things. Dad looked at me and said bluntly, "You made Dylan suffer. Are you satisfied now?" I stood there, holding the bag of fruit, feeling as if I'd been slapped. I left without a word. I haven't gone back since. The hurt runs deeper than I expected. I did everything for my family, worked, sacrificed, forgave, but in return, I lost them. I sat in my apartment, staring at the letter I'd sent Dylan, returned unopened. Their rejection a final blow. Wondering if I was wrong. Was I too harsh? Did I, as Dad said, tear the family apart? But then I remembered the years of being overlooked, the times I swallowed my tears to keep pushing forward. No, I wasn't wrong. I chose to protect my worth, and if the price was this distance, I'd accept it. Dylan may be changing, but the wound in me remains. I don't hate him. I don't hate my parents. I'm just tired. Tired of proving I deserve love, deserve respect. I continue my work, standing on stages, sharing my story. But each time I look out at the audience, I no longer search for my family's eyes. I've learned to stand on my own, even if my heart still aches. Tonight, I sit at my desk, the golden glow of the lamp casting light on the pages of my favorite book. On the shelf, the speech trophy from my high school days still sits, tarnished but intact, a reminder of my journey. I'm not writing this story to talk about success or to boast about my achievements. I'm writing to speak of the scars, the choices, and the lessons I've learned from a family that once meant everything to me. Life isn't fair. I understood that from a young age when my efforts were forgotten, when my accomplishments were overlooked, simply because I was the strong older brother. But I also learned that fairness isn't something others hand to you. Fairness is something you must claim by living true to your values, by standing up for yourself, even if it means confronting the people you love most. Dylan was wrong when he took my truck, when he pawned it as if I owed him, but my parents were even more wrong for shielding him, for dismissing my pain. I didn't sue Dylan for revenge. I sued to make him understand that every action has consequences, that life isn't a series of days forgiven without condition. And I set strict requirements: a job, responsibility, transparency. Not to make things hard for him, but to teach him to live like a man, the way I had. My decision wasn't easy. I lost my parents not because they passed away, but because they chose to stand by Dylan even when he was wrong. I lost the family evenings, the check-in calls, the hugs I once craved, but I don't regret it. I helped Dylan change, even if just a little. He works, pays off his debt, and has started taking care of himself. It's a small victory, but for me, it's enough to prove I was right. More importantly, I protected my self-respect. I'm no longer the boy clutching a speech trophy, waiting for my parents' approving gaze. I'm no longer the strong older brother, ready to sacrifice to keep the peace. I'm Justin Harper, a man who knows his worth, who knows he deserves respect, even if it costs him the closest relationships. This story doesn't have a happy ending like in the movies. My family didn't reconcile, my parents didn't apologize, and Dylan didn't become the perfect brother. But life doesn't need perfect endings. It needs right choices, even if they hurt. I chose the hard path, not just to protect my possessions, but to protect myself, and to give Dylan a chance to grow. I sacrificed my relationship with my family, but I found freedom. Freedom to live true to myself, to no longer be bound by unreasonable expectations. If you're reading this story, I want you to remember one thing. Don't wait for others to recognize your worth. Don't sacrifice yourself to please those who don't see you. Stand up, claim your fairness, and live with self-respect, even if it means walking alone. I did it, and though my heart still aches, I've found a fragile peace, scarred but unbroken, knowing I stood for myself, even if it cost me the family I loved.